Didn't happen to me, but it happened to my ex-boyfriend when he was about maybe 16 years old. Now, this sometime happened some time ago when he was 16 years old. When my ex-boyfriend turned 16, sometime I guess you could say around 2016, he was going to this house party that he wasn't supposed to go. But before he was grounded, this is what happened. He went to this house party because his friend named Dustin asked him to go with them. So my ex-boyfriend, doing that he wasn't supposed to, he ended up going to this house party. When he got to the house party that was owned by a woman named Jessica, who happened to be around maybe his age, invited everyone to the house party since her parents were away for the weekend. So as the house party was going on, they were all partying and cheering and all that, doing all what, teenagers like to do. But unfortunately, my ex-boyfriend got so wasted, he got down some drinks, and when he did, he ended up passing out on the couch. It wasn't until an hour later he woke up, and he realized that he was in a hospital. He couldn't remember exactly what happened, but all he remembered that was someone had drugged his drinks when he went to the bathroom, and Jessica told him about it because he didn't remember. And this was honestly the scariest thing that's ever happened to him. But with that said, this is the reason why my ex-boyfriend does not go to house parties anymore. And he still worries about it to this very day of what could have happened if nobody had told him that his drinks were spiked. Chances were he couldn't be as lucky as the other kids were, but this was the only one and only house party he's ever been to. About sometime in 2017, I was invited to this one house party, and this honestly was the freakiest one I've been to. Now, I went to a couple house parties, but I try not to go there too much as they weren't really my thing. But I went to this one house party as it was like a celebration from graduating high school. Even though I didn't really graduate, I just went there because one of my friends invited me there and thought, I could just use some time out of the house. I went to this house party that was a pretty good party. There was some alcohol being served and lots of other stuff, and I was doing my usual thing. However, we all of a sudden decided to go and play some manhunt out in the woods for, kind of like a little house party game. I know house parties don't usually have these kind of games, but since this house was located not far from the woods, we all decided to go in and play some flashlight tag. Now, I was one of the runners while the other team were the hunters, and the last person standing gets a prize, which was a free booze, which was pretty interesting. I ended up running as far as I could into the woods so I can hide in the place where the people wouldn't find me. But as I see them getting closer, I would have to go and sneakily get out before they could even think of finding me. Now, in this house party, we don't usually play this game, but we thought it would be nice as a few of my friends wanted to play it. Now, as I could see that light, I had a feeling that it was the hunters, so I ended up going further into the woods. I was careful though, and I was careful not to trip over anything or anyone, so I found what seems to be an old shed. The old shed looked like it had been used in years, and I was confused as why would there be a shed in the middle of the woods. I ended up going inside the shed, and I realized that there was just a couch that was torn up, but it was a decent one to use, and there was a sleeping bag, and I looked to see that there was nobody outside. I stayed hidden in the shed, made sure nobody was in the shed, and stayed in there for what seemed to be a while. As I stayed in there for a while, I did not expect it to hear this, but I heard footsteps coming from the other side followed by twigs and branches snapping. I had a feeling it might have been one of the hunters, or maybe somebody else. I opened up the door so carefully and looked around, but I couldn't find anybody. Then I heard some footsteps again, and this time I became even more scared. Wasn't sure if this was any of my friends playing a trick on me, or maybe just playing around. But I looked over, and of course a couple meters where I was standing, there was a guy who had an axe and it was bloodied. I ended up running all the way back as fast as I could. Luckily, I outrun him as he seemed to be maybe too weak to move as he was limping. But when I got back to the house party, all of our friends were back there, including my teammates and even police officers. I told them what I saw in the woods, and the police told me that there had been a serial killer in the woods that had a shed in the woods that had been used to lure people in there. Unfortunately, a girl in my age was killed last weekend, and they went in the woods to investigate to see if they could find the guy. They found the shed, but I'm not sure if they ever destroyed it or ever caught the man, as we're not sure if he's ever been caught or not. I have been glad to outrun him, because I don't know what would have happened if I did not run away. Chances are, I could have been in that same fate that girl was in. I still don't go to house parties very much anymore, but I remember this every time I being asked to people if I would go to a house party. My friend named Charlotte was about maybe 22 years old, and this happened sometime back in 2014. She was invited to this house party as most of her colleagues were going to be off for summer, and they decided to go do stuff for the summer, which was to house the house party. Most of them were graduating, but Charlotte only had a year or so to go, so she ended up going to this house party as most of her friends were going to be there. As she was at that house party, she was having a bunch of fun. But then she felt the urge to use the bathroom, so she went upstairs to use one of her friend's bathrooms that she was invited to this house party. As she was in the bathroom, she looked over to see that there was a handprint on the curtain. Thinking that maybe somebody was in the bathroom having a shower, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were in there. I can use the other one." Just as she was about to get up, the hand wasn't there anymore, and this was starting to freak her out. She turned off the lights again, but heard nothing, but then flipped them back on again, and then she walked over to the shower. She saw that handprint there and had a feeling that somebody was actually in there. Now Charlotte opened up the curtains, but she absolutely saw no one. She looked over the other side of the shower curtain, thinking it might have been maybe a stain of blood or something, maybe on the curtains, but there was nothing. As she sat down in the toilet, she saw it again. But she, of course, did her business, and just as she was about to leave, the hand was gone, print was gone. She didn't tell anybody about this story, as she was afraid that nobody would really believe her, or in this case, they would have called the cops and canceled the party. So Charlotte has never told anybody about this story, but what she experienced that day was completely paranormal. This took place in Toronto, or at least a big city in Ontario, sometime in 2016. And this is honestly one of the scariest moments that my friend named Melissa ever had experienced. Melissa was living there at the time, and she had a big house party, which of course she invited just her friends, and they were just having a house party as her parents said it was okay, since Melissa was only 22, and of course her parents were out for the weekend. There wasn't really going to be a big hassle with our friends just having a little mini house party. They weren't really having a big house party, as most of the guests couldn't arrive because they were busy with college, university, and other stuff. So in the meantime, they were just sitting there and having a house party, drinking, watching movies, and etc. So they were just doing their usual thing when they saw someone on their front porch. They were standing by the porch, and Melissa thought that maybe it was somebody needed help, as they had a neighbor who was an elderly who needed assistance every now and then. So she opened the door to find that there was a woman. She looked to be maybe in her mid-30s, and she looked like she was in distress. She looked homeless, so Melissa was quite confused. "Hey, can you give me some shelter for me and my baby? We've been living out here for a while, and I need a place to stay for at least a few nights." Melissa realized that this woman was probably planning on something, and as she looked in the bushes and saw there were two hooded men. Now, Melissa immediately said, I'm sorry, I don't have room. Maybe you could try the next house, she suggested. But this woman did not listen. She said another set of words. Can you give me shelter for me and my baby? B, we're homeless and we need your help. Once again, Melissa told him no, and with that being said, the woman said something as she stepped away. You made the right decision. Now, with that said, Melissa and her friends, looked over, and they realized that there was a hooded man and the woman. Now, they called the cops, but unfortunately they couldn't find the men, or even the men. But of course, Melissa explained the best of what these women looked like, and said that they had at least a few people behind the bushes. With that said, the police searched the area in Toronto, but they never found anybody. They're still convinced that it might have been somebody, or probably trying to lure people into a trap, to try to lure this woman in to get help. But of course, it turns out that this woman wasn't really in danger or in need of help. She was probably trying to rob at least the amount of money, or probably kidnap that Melissa, or do God knows what. But Melissa has never hosted a house party again, and this is honestly one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to her. She moved out of Toronto at least a few months later, as she couldn't really figure out, or she couldn't really understand why this was happening. But she never hosted a house party again, and it's going to stay that way for a very long time.